Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's community call. I'm your usual host, Rachel, and joining me today is Emily. So, can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do at API 3?
Hey guys, I'm Emily. I mostly plan and manage tools and processes at API 3 with the operations team.
Awesome, awesome. So, usually we have our little kind of API 3 current events before we start our topic. So, I'm going to do that now. Next week, API 3 will be at ETHCC in Paris. So, we're going to have a lot of stuff going on there. So, just kind of keep your eye out on our Twitter and our Discord, and uh, we'll be posting a lot of content from there. Ashar was on Coindesk's community crypto TV show talking about Web3 hackathons, and you can catch that on Coindesk's site and our Twitter. We reposted the video there. Ben also went on to Moonbeam for the Moon Builders workshop for API 3 Quantum RNG with a dynamic NFT mint. So covering how we can do quantum dynamic NFT mints on the Moonbeam chain. So it was that. And then speaking of the QRNG NFTs, it's a lot of letters, a lot of acronym. Ashar also published his full guide to creating your own NFT minting contract using the QRNG that you can look at on his Medium page. And Ashar, when he was on before, talked about being able to mint those dynamic NFTs. So now you can finally see the full guide for that and how you can incorporate that into your own projects if you are curious. So now we're going to get into our topic for today. I'm excited to talk about this because I think I've mentioned it before on several of our calls that I really like games. And Emily wrote a fantastic article on our Redefining Trust series on our Medium, and it was on gaming and blockchain gaming and randomness. So, can you go a little bit into what you wrote there?
Sure. So that article was fun to write. I am not a very heavy gamer. I do some light gaming sometimes with my kids, but way far away from a lot of the stuff that this article touches. But we start with a lot of the interesting background of just human nature's draw to randomness. It seems like we always find random events that we're trying to put logic into, or we're taking physical phenomenon that we don't understand and trying to assign randomness to it. And it seems like a very human thing that goes back civilizations. So we start with early gaming mechanics when they do start solidifying gaming mechanisms, and then how we've translated that into a digital gaming environment from simple things like solitaire, where it's pretty predictable, we understand the mechanisms, to even more modern games where we've introduced algorithms that have a ton of different outputs. And the dynamic has changed so much now that it's less predictable. So we talk a lot about the trust gap there, since we can't just predict it so easily. And sometimes it even feeds off of our interactions with the game. It seems even less transparent and trustworthy. So bringing some of that dynamic back onto blockchain could help alleviate some of that stress that players feel when they don't see that transparency. And in particular, things like gambling and loot crates, where there is no even output randomness to that. It's just trust us, this algorithm is spitting out something random. And a lot of the times we find that players don't wholly feel that it's random, whether it's just a fairness of how many times you get the same thing that you've got 10 items in your inventory, it's identical, or you get an item that you can't use whether you're not in the right stage or level. So things like that, we talk about how if we introduce to blockchain, even present some ideas where true randomness from QRNG can even elevate player capacity even more.
Yeah, I definitely like, as you say, like the true randomness, or as you talk about, just trust us kind of randomness on the video game thing. I'm not like a big loot crate person. I kind of got into games in the era before microtransactions and loot crates were like a big thing. But I have a bunch of friends that are big into those like mobile games that you're trying to get characters, and you've got to spend points, and the points can be bought with money, of course. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna spend this in-game currency to get 10 random whatevers, right?
And
And
if
then
you're
you
not
end up with
spending
like,
money, it's a
yeah, you end
ton
up
of
with
time.
yeah, it's like you end up with characters you can't use or you have multiples of, or you just want that one thing, and you just can't get it because it's random. But we all know it's not really random, right?
So that's what I found so interesting is I didn't realize, like, through discussions in the community, there's a lot of developers that just won't give out even the percentage chance that you'll get something. So there's like an acceptance that legendary items are harder to get because the randomness is less. But there's, if you're going to do that to build trust with your community, that you're actually acknowledging the user experience, there's got to be a little more, what prerequisites do I have to hit before I can even get a legendary item? Or is it literally just random? I can play my whole life and I'm never going to get
Right.
it. And I think that's what's
Right.
lacking right now in that randomization.
I think the crazy thing is like when you go to games that are maybe and not necessarily a single player experience, but like the games that I can think of that have this example is people have figured out like the percentage chance for a certain, sword to drop or armor to drop or something. And then you go and see your friend's inventory and they're only like 8 hours into the game or something, and you've put 100 hours in and you still don't have this one piece and they've got like all of it. You're like, how did you get that? It's like it just I don't know. I just killed a guy and I got it. Like, and it's
Yeah.
a 0.0000007% chance of dropping when you kill this one specific, monster or something like that. And then there's just this amazingness. But it's the games that have shown, hey, this is a this many percent chance of dropping it that you're like, wait a minute, that's like actually super rare. That's hard to get. And the fact that you got it on, your second try through the area is just, wow, that's crazy. So I think the transparency kind of gives you a little bit of like, it makes it more special somehow. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
Like,
Because you just at least have that, I just didn't have that luck with me.
right.
But it can also go the other way if you see too many people getting it luck on the first try. It plays into that human psychosis of like the loss aversion where somebody gets something that you didn't. It hits a lot harder when you've
Mm,
been putting so many hours into it because that's all lost time that you're interpreting that you should have gotten that item and you haven't. So there's a
yeah.
lot of interesting mechanisms that we got to in this article.
Yeah, and it's a lot of that kind of thing in games now. It's like the loss aversion kind of thing with humans, we like, oh well, I don't want to waste my time on that, so I'm just not going to do it. But then as soon as you do it just a little bit, you have your kind of sunken cost fallacy that's like, okay, so I already spent, 8 hours on this game. I still don't have the item I want, but I've already spent 8 hours, so I'm going to keep doing it. And that's where the gambling kind of
Right.
mechanism goes in, the loot crate thing goes in, and that's why it's so profitable. That's why so many people do it, right?
But that's the interesting thing about those is there's that loss aversion. And the other half of that is that win is never as impactful as that loss. But
Mm,
with gambling, there's that dopamine release of, but it could be next time. And that's what the loot crate feeds off of so effectively.
yeah.
But like you said, if that loss ultimately is so much bigger than that feeling of that gain, that's where they've lost. And it seems like as a whole, they're starting to fall on that. It's more of a loss than a lot of communities think it's worth.
Hmm. Interesting. And I think it's definitely different amongst different communities, right? Because there's definitely games that are built around this kind of uh loot crate gotcha mechanic sort of thing. And those games, I feel like it's just like the community's like, yeah, this is just the way it works, right? And then some games that are like, oh, you're trying to get this gear that only drops off this one monster in this one area in this one place, so you got to kill it 700 times to get all the gear you want. I think that's where it becomes a little annoying, right?
Yeah, it's a balance. And some games have struck it and others have not.
Right, for sure. I like the idea that, you also presented in the article about like true ownership of in-game assets. I thought that was really interesting. You want to talk a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the bigger value propositions that coming onto blockchain in general does. Right now, there's a bunch of items. A lot of them are duplicates, but you can't do anything with them. They're only the single players. You can't go around and sell and trade with people. And if you could, I think there would be so much more enrichment to the communities. But in order to do that, there have to be identifiers set up and they have to jump through. Like right now, you'd have to jump through hoops to even get stuff from an old account to a new account, right? Like there have been situations where games have been bought out, and when you want to transfer all of your stuff, you have to proof of purchase. You have to go in and within a certain time frame create a new account, get all your stuff situated. But even then, you're still losing some of that value sometimes. Whether they
Right.
say you don't get to use this item that you used to get to turn in for items, whatever the case may be. But if all that were taken onto blockchain with identifiers, you could keep all of that stuff in a much more thorough register. And it would be a lot harder for companies to just buy out games, take out elements, and not reimburse you for them in some way. But if
Right.
you add that transparency, it improves the gamer experience tremendously, especially in game buyout type situations. But to get true ownership, you really have to control the items you possess. And if it comes down to you can't buy and sell it, or you can't trade it among people, you lose it if there's a buyout, that doesn't give you much ownership. But if you can get unique identifiers within a game, it makes it easy to sell and trade among the community. But the most interesting part that QRNG and gives is you can actually create an identifier among games altogether. So it's easy to see where you could overlap if you just let each identifier stay within games and then just use them interchangeably. But to make it really reliable so that you could trade assets everywhere, you would need an unpredictable method to create a unique identifier that would work among games. And that's where QRNG could be really valuable. You could introduce these items with these identifiers that really could be bought, sold, traded among players anywhere.
And that's actually something like not just like, companies buy out a game or something like that. And then like, okay, now it doesn't really work the same way anymore. I've lost some of my assets. I know plenty of people that have spent a lot of time on multiplayer games, big, MMORPG kind of games, something like that, where they've sunk hundreds of hours into it. And then the company just kind of, okay, we're done supporting this game now. It's been fun. Bye. Like, and now you can't even play the game anymore, right? Like,
Yeah.
all those assets that you spent all that time grinding for, now they're useless. But if, we move, let's say the ideal world is we move all games onto blockchain. Now the level 300 gold magic super sword that you got in this game is compatible in 9 or 10 other different games, and it's like, okay, that game might not work anymore, right? That
Yeah.
game could go away, but these 9 other games aren't all going to go away. So now I can use my level 300 super gold magic sword in those games too. So you really have, like you said, ownership over your assets, but you also have the kind of interoperability of using that asset somewhere else as well.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I do wonder how much, if blockchain were the centralized entity of games, how much would the network be able to support games, even if people on the team just dropped off and decided not to support it anymore? Like, how much would that facilitate the community being able to just step up and take ownership of those games?
And I've definitely seen it before where like a game has had a big enough community of dedicated people where they're like, we're not letting this game die. Whether that be, we're going to continue to update it, or we're going to move it over into an entirely different engine, and then somebody's going to run a server and we're all going to play it together. Or, maybe it's just people playing locally, but like there's games that are quote unquote like dead games that people definitely still play. And I know people that have even like put hours and hours into rebuilding entire games and new engines just so that they can play it again. And I think that's awesome. Like you said, with the kind of open source sort of nature of blockchain, I feel like that would happen if a game were to kind of die, essentially. The team, they might not support it anymore officially, but like the community could take that code or that, those assets and run a whole new game that's basically the same game, but, the decentralized nature of blockchain allows that kind of thing to happen. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and I think that's awesome. Like, I think you can tell, like, I'm a game person. I like games.
Oh, it's
um,
fascinating. Even as a non-gamer, that was a really interesting article to write.
yeah, and I think it was really cool to see it from like a non-gamer perspective writing the article as well. I think I talked about this with Tom a lot with the technical writing. Is like sometimes you're so far into it that you don't realize that people don't know necessarily what you're talking about. You've got a lot of jargon that you're familiar with, and you can say loot crate and microtransaction and all this other stuff, or DLC or something like that. I know what DLC means, but that doesn't mean that somebody else that, isn't into the game world knows what that means. So I think it's actually really cool to read an article written by somebody who's not like a consummate like mega gamer or something like that, about video games and about real life like physical games as well. There's a lot of randomness that goes into games that I play, like tabletop games or something like that, or even just Monopoly or Sorry or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And you're rolling a dice. Our QRNG logo is a dice, right? So there is a randomness there, and I think that's cool. So yeah, you also wrote the redefining trust thing is like a series. You've also wrote an article about how blockchain can be used for trust in other areas like voting. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that one was a topic much more close to my heart. But
Mm.
it's just another one goes to the history of voting, different mechanisms different civilizations have used, and some processes are much more relevant for the populations than others. And here in the US, our voting system is very cumbersome for how many people we have and how spread out everybody is. It's a bunch of dragging a bunch of physical machinery, multiples to cities, dragging a few out to like very isolated areas, and then having people to man those locations, bring everything back, tally up votes if there's something closely contested. It's long lines, people have to take off work. It's just a lot of effort to go out and vote. And I know it's that way in many countries, but introducing blockchain would remove a lot of the need to transport all this machinery, reduce the need to have staffing. We could have a lot more information packed into something like a token that would identify a human. They'd be able to get access anywhere. They could, at this point, they could get access to a library, anywhere they could have connectivity. You wouldn't have to necessarily take a whole day off work to stand an hour in line to vote. It would just remove that accessibility barrier and remove a lot of logistic stuff that makes voting such a huge cumbersome process.
Right, and even I'm American as well, but I don't live in the U.S. and I've had to vote in several elections, and I want to still participate in voting, but I have to absentee vote, which is an entirely different process, but it is arduous as well. It's like you got to do all this stuff, and then you mail it off, and you hope it gets there. It might not get there. Who knows? So it
Right.
might
And
get
that's the
stuck in a bucket in the post office, and your vote doesn't get counted, right? So.
and that's the bit with transparency is there's so many great conspiracy stories about where votes go. Have they been stolen off a FedEx truck? Was
Yeah.
this ballot box just dumped somewhere, so we're missing votes? And all of those stories, whether they're true or not, come out of a distrust for the system. If it was just more transparent and you could just see, hey, my vote was counted, there it is,
Hmm.
you wouldn't have that. And we could take focus off of like here we definitely have a divide, right? And right now all that distrust feeds into it. And if we could all at least take a step back and say, hey, my vote is there, it did count, I think that would take a lot away and we'd be able to really focus on things that the people want anyway. That's why they go to vote is for these topics, not to fight over whether or not their vote actually
The vote
mattered.
got counted, right?
Yeah.
And it's like it's something that with blockchain you talked about earlier with QRNG, the unique identifier that you could put on the NFT for a game. You could put that kind of similar unique identifier onto something like a digital social security card that would prove your identity when you go to vote. And that's something that could not be faked, essentially. And that would make, everybody gets a vote, right?
And
Everybody who
that's where
has this
some
specific identifier, right?
Yeah, and that's where something like true randomness is really much more valuable because it's so much more secure. We all have that fear that our identity is lost. And if we brought something like this onto blockchain, they would essentially house all of our personal information and our voting history. It's got to be secure. So anything that somebody could like hack an algorithm to or like break the seed code, we'd be in trouble. So like even QRNG introduces a brand new possibility to really embed all these things really securely. But you talk about accessibility on one end, but being able to even tie into your identifier like your age, your jurisdiction, what are you actually allowed to vote in due to whatever qualifications the locale has decided you can or cannot vote against. All of that stuff could be packed into an identifier, and then we could all see securely who's identified that they are authenticated to vote in that election and their response. And we could even provide, a hash that doesn't identify that person individually, but we can at least verify this has to be a human because you can't get this hash without having these identifiers and these verifications. There's just so many good things that could come from putting voting into a very secure mechanism that way.
And I really like the accessibility kind of point of it as well, where, like I said, with absentee voting, with people that live in rural areas or something like that. I grew up in a place where, you have farm towns that are like 12 people, but the 12 people live in like a 50-mile, massive area that's, it's very spread out. It's very sparsely populated. And how do those people get to vote? Are they going to spend 3 hours driving to their nearest polling location, then sit in line for another 3 hours and do all this other stuff? Like, you know, there's talks that could be made that why the voting system stays so obfuscated and outdated and archaic and all that stuff in the US specifically, but like just overall, if you're wanting to efficiently do something, the argument for blockchain and digital voting is definitely there.
Yeah, yeah.
And I like it. I mean, I like the uses that we're seeing for QRNG. I think it's really funny when we had Dr. Tranter on here talking about it initially. He was like, "Yeah, I've heard so many different uses for it that I didn't expect, somebody naming their baby with QRNG.
Yeah.
Like crazy stuff. And then now the more calls we've had and the more conferences, people have been to talking about QRNG, the more tech demo kind of hackathon sort of things that the team has done as well with various different chains in different places has like come up with new projects for using QRNG, like, Quantumons and stuff like that. I don't think Dr. Tranter ever thought, that he was going to have a NFT with little cute monsters generated with a QRNG machine, right? But
Yeah.
there it is, right? And so we found this technology that's just amazing and put it on blockchain, and now we're seeing all these kind of use cases spring up that nobody, not even the creator, kind of anticipated. So I think it's really cool. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to our human fascination with randomness. We're going to use it everywhere we can, and we're going to use it where we need it to make sense of what we can't.
Right. It's like, okay, what do we want to eat for dinner? Oh, well, now you flip a coin, right? Or you roll a dice or something, and maybe there's like in the future there's the what do you want to eat for dinner,
Yeah.
app that you push the button and it gives you a totally verifiably random, suggestion for dinner in your area, right?
Yeah.
So,
There's a lot of fun potentials. A lot of fun potentials.
yeah. I think that's awesome. If the community is interested, that is watching today or whenever, is interested in kind of getting more detail of the two articles that we talked about today, you can find them on the API 3 Medium. So, yeah, go see Emily's fantastic writing on both voting and gaming. I'm going to check our Twitter for a second to see if we got any questions from the community. Is there anything that you are planning for our next kind of redefining trust series, Emily?
We actually haven't met about our next one yet, but we do have a new communications lead that looks like he would be interested in getting in. So we're going to talk about our next topic. We've got several that are always on the back burner, but if there's something that the community even wants to hear about, we're open to suggestions too.
Yeah, and we also have a forum for the community call questions as well. If you can think of something and you want to write it in there and kind of have it be anonymous or something like that, you can do that. Our Discord is also very responsive, and so is our Twitter. So you can get in contact with the team there, thinking about, trust and blockchain and applications for QRNG. Really, just anything. If you want to tell us, show us pictures of your cat or something as well, just drop into the Discord and say hi, right? I think we all love seeing pictures of cute cats and stuff like that, and dogs. We don't discriminate here. But yeah, I haven't seen any comments from the community on stream yet. So I don't think we'll be having the little community question section. But yeah, I think this has been a really cool talk today. I'm always excited to get on stream and talk about video games for sure. And seeing how we can apply blockchain to that and QRNG specifically is really cool. It's going to make me think about, the next time I play a game, think like, how can I apply blockchain to this game that I'm playing? It'll be running in the back of my mind for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you very much for coming on the call and talking with us today,
Thanks,
Emily.
Rachel.
So just a reminder for people who may be watching now and who might watch later, this call will be uploaded on social media, and we're going to have a call probably in the next 2 weeks as well, covering some other topic with another speaker. So as always, if you would like to suggest topics for a call, hit us up on our social media, Twitter, Discord, even a YouTube comment or something like that is fine too. So thank you very much for watching today. Thank you for coming on again, Emily. And that is the end of our call this week. Bye.